Let's now talk about monitoring systems. When you are auditing, you might very well want to look at the logs from monitoring systems. You might want to say, okay, can I see the log for who got into that particular database? Can I see the network log? Can I see the IDS log? Can I see the firewall log? Can I see whatever this or that log? It's important that in any network environment besides the very smallest that there is some kind of logging, and all firewall products have logging. All operating systems have the ability to turn on logging for this, this, and this. So let's talk about logging and scanning and monitoring. Part of what you may do if you get into something very technical, like you're looking at network security, system security, is you may indeed do vulnerability scans. And we'll talk about those in greater detail later. But you'll want to scan systems, networks, and you'll want to also look at just regular logging, and you'll want to just have monitoring in general. A good system administrator or a good network administrator is going to have some kind of logging or general monitoring, possibly even a console that they look at on a regular basis. If we were to take a look at some examples of scanning, like for example here, this is an example of just a monitoring console. We can see host and service statuses, we can see details, and we can just tell at a glance. Usually these monitoring consoles will be able to let us see at a glance really quickly what's critical and what is good. So then usually you can click these things and get more details. So here is one example of a console for monitoring. Here's another example of a tool that we can use to look for wireless access availability. Maybe we're looking for rogue wireless access points because people do it for convenience. I mean, I've walked into a place and the general manager put a wireless access point on a file cabinet down the hall because he wanted to be able to just go into a conference room and provide wireless capability. Problem is that, of course, that radiant signal went way out beyond the building, and all you had to do is sit in a parking lot with a directional antenna and just start picking it up. And you could get right into the files and folders and whatever. I've seen people even 2 miles away with a cantenna that costs $70 or $10 to build, be able to, from 2 miles away, just aim down a freeway, get into proprietary data, look at spreadsheets, things like that. So here's another example of something where we can look for maybe wireless access points. Here's another thing where we can get different kinds of reports. So different monitoring consoles and tools will show different things. As an IS auditor, you'll be interested in looking at the logs and also looking to see what are people monitoring. Are they actually taking a look at what's going on in their network, what's going on in their services, their servers, their systems, not just for security's sake, but also for performance as well. Because if we have a certain requirement for security, we got to be able to prove that we are maintaining that security and that we're monitoring for it. So the idea of monitoring is really, really important. In addition, you'll periodically have to scan a system for vulnerability, and there are all kinds of scanners. Some are more intrusive than others, some are very expensive, some are free. But you can, and there are a number of decent free ones out there, where you basically want to scan the network or scan systems, and you're looking for open ports. Basically, a port is how you can connect to a specific service on a server across the network. And you'll look for ways to get into a system across the network. So a very simple example of that would be, like here is a simple port scanner, where I'm going to basically scan my own machine to look for any open ports. The open ports themselves don't necessarily mean there's a vulnerability, but it means the server is willing to accept a connection on that port. And so I can see, as I drill down, that I have 3 open ports, and I have a certain number of closed ports as well. And I can see here that this server is accepting Microsoft Remote Procedure Call, as all Microsoft machines do. It is listening on the old NetBIOS-based SMB port, TCP/139, in other words, file and print, and also on the newer CIFS and also the LSA login for port 445. Right now, I can deduce immediately this is a Microsoft machine because Microsoft machines use these specifically as opposed to others. And I can also see other ports were closed. Now, is that a vulnerability? It is a point of access. The next question is the service that's listening on that port vulnerable? Because I can go up and I can get that service's attention and say, hi, I'd like to make a connection, start a session. But now, once I start a session, can I do anything to that service? So scanning across the network, on a system, whatever, this is a common thing that you'll do when you're doing IS auditing. Looking at logs from monitoring consoles, a very, very common sort of thing that we will do when we're an IS auditor. After we've been scanning for vulnerabilities, after we've been monitoring logs and looking at monitoring logs, we can, of course, review, and not only that, but we'll need to periodically update the results of our findings. So, well, did you run a scan, a vulnerability scan? Yeah, how long ago? 6 months ago. Okay, let's maybe update that scan. And then we'll have to manage what we discover. Most scanners, unless they're the really free, cheap ones, will also have recommendations on what you can do about the vulnerabilities that are discovered. And most of them even have links, or they'll tell you some particular knowledge base number or some other information about it, so you can do something about it. And as we're looking at all of this, as we're scanning and monitoring, we are indeed trying to identify what are the potential threats and weaknesses, or what has happened. We're trying to identify not only did we see a vulnerability, or are we identifying that this is a kind of activity that shouldn't have happened, that's unusual activity, and therefore we'll investigate farther. So we're on the lookout for these kinds of things. As much as you can automate some of these scanning and monitoring, that's better, because there's so much data that automated tools can help you kind of crunch that data down a whole lot quicker and get to what you need to see a lot faster. And then always, of course, we're looking at, why did we even do this? Why did we even install this server? Why did we even put up this firewall? Why do we even have that connection? We're looking at the business driver behind it. You know, and this is for you network IT people and server administrator folks, and this is my background too. Once upon a time, what we did in IT was simply a cost to business. And once upon a time, if they could have gotten rid of us to get rid of that cost, they would have. Now the thinking from all the way up to top management is changing, and the smart upper managers recognize this, that IT is no longer just a cost center, no longer a necessary evil or something. It is actually something that assists the whole business in achieving its business objectives. So therefore, everything we do, all the purchases, all the things we set up, everything we configure, everything we do, has to be aimed at supporting that business objective. So we're always looking at, what was the business driver behind doing this? And so these are the things that we need to monitor, not just simply port scan, but why did we even do it? And as an IS auditor, why did they do that? Were they thinking about the business? Were they supporting the business when they did that? And because our whole thing is, what are the business objectives? What are the controls in place? And are they being implemented properly? So part of that is, why did you go and buy 20 servers? Ah, you needed it because you needed to build out your data center. Okay, got it. So as we develop our whole security architecture, we'll be thinking about the physical architecture and the logical architecture. So when we talk about physical, of course, we're talking about, where are we placing the cables? Let me tell you a story about one place. I went into this one place. They had lost connectivity up on the 5th floor. And the question is, why did they lose their T1? Tomorrow they had a video conference. And so why did they lose that? So we went into the phone room just to take a look. And I had my telephone toner. And we were looking around. And there were just so many clients in that building. It was hard to trace where anything was. We finally found down the one punch block where the cables for the T1 for that one particular suite went to. And the building engineer came in. This is a Sunday. And he comes up and he says, what are you guys doing? And we said, oh, well, we're trying to trace out why this particular suite, this office, lost their internet connectivity. And he says, you know what? There was a phone guy here on Friday working right where you are right now. So we went, oh, groan. Somehow the guy bumped something, broke something, and we just found out now from the building engineer somebody was there before us. One of the problems, of course, when you're in a building, if you don't own the entire building, you're sharing a telecommunications closet with everybody else, all the other customers. And so you never know who's going in and out. I mean, when we got there, the phone room door was propped open on a Sunday. Nobody was there, and anybody could walk in. And so you're worried about where cables physically are. You're worried about, is stuff locked? I mean, I've been to plenty of places on a hot weekend afternoon, server room door is propped open, and there's no one around. You're worried about the fences and the lighting and all the perimeter security. And you're worried about, is guard presence extended by the use of cameras? What kinds of door locks do we have? Are the locks working? And so you're always looking for that. Do we have redundant systems? Do we have multiple power supplies? Do we have a generator? Do we have, or at least something where we can kick in power? Do we have UPSs? What do we have? Because it's not just people breaking in, but there'll be some kind of natural thing, or there's a spike in the power, so we need to kick in the generator. So you're going to be looking for redundant systems as well as just flat out physical security. And then, of course, in the logical architecture, you're going to be worried about what process do we go through? What are our procedures? What are our guidelines? What are our standards? What software do we use to secure and control things? But not only that, in terms of process, what do we do with printed documents? I mean, I was at this one health facility where a district health officer went to train the local staff. It was a small location. And they used live data to basically show some things. They had printed out some live patient data, including HIV status. And then it was okay. The staff had the right to see all that stuff, and the district health officer had the right to see certain things. But they left the printout lying around. And the next thing they knew, an unauthorized person found it, and the next thing they knew, they were hearing about it on the local radio station, where the local radio station DJs were mocking them, saying, they left this printout with patient information around. So, I mean, you have to worry about in your process, what do you do with documents that are private and confidential, as well as what logical network access restriction do we have? And also, how do we report things? How do we escalate things? So when you do this, start with what are you trying to protect and how do you run your business? That's really it. How do you run your business? What are the processes day to day? And then what can you do to protect every process, everything people touch, everything people access? And as an IS auditor, you need to see, did they think this through? Do they have procedures for protecting everything people touch, everything people do, and at what point did they decide that the risk is just residual risk? When they've thought all that stuff through, then they've done due diligence. And so that is going to be one of the things you're going to be concerned about when you're looking at information security architecture. Now, the next thing we'll talk about is specific types of attack methods and techniques.